What are we gonna do, Bob? Well, we're safe for now. Thank goodness we're in a bowling alley. And thank goodness you're all here for that. Welcome, my friends, to yet another episode of the Top 10 Favorite and from what I believe are the best performances by some of the greatest actors of all time. You bet your sweet nuggets I am starting from 10 and then slowly staring at you with deadly, slimy grimace all the way up to number 1. I'm just kidding, of course, but I have seen every film attainable of each artist. Don't ever forget that. So every list here, folks, comes from truthful, passionate, and very sincere, as well as very heartfelt accuracy. Now, it's not what I want, Jeffrey. It's what you want. And I'm sure there are plenty of you awaiting this top 10 of one of the most understated and underrated actors of all time, folks. I've been wanting to do this top 10 for such a long time, I can't even tell you. For here is an actor you have seen in everything, which gives him the proper title of one of the greatest character actors in all of cinema, known simply as JTWalsh. Born James Thomas Patrick Walsh, you bet he's totally of Irish descent, in San Francisco, but lived in Munich, learning to speak German and was very fluent in German actually, while his father was stationed there. But after his father's sudden death of a brain tumor, the Walsh family moved back to the U.S., residing in Rhode Island, where James continued his studies, majoring in sociology at the University of Rhode Island, but also became very inspired by the theater and starring in a couple of the theater productions there. During that time, he was also very active in the SDS demonstrations against the Vietnam War. He sincerely was a political advocate, volunteering for the UTO, United Tenant Organizations of Rhode Island. But like an everyman, he took jobs from wherever he could, between a barman, an encyclopedia salesman, a gym equipment salesman, and a junior high school teacher, all of which would be the great man-made experience to fuel his capacity as a grade A actor. Since there was another actor named James Walsh, he took his own James Thomas and made it JT to avoid confusion and make his own name for himself. He would be discovered in the mid-1970s and brought over to do off-Broadway, such as the off-Broadway premiere of DavidMamet's American Buffalo, playing Bobby, to then appearing in Richard III, starring Al Pacino as King Richard, the play Rose, Last Licks, Macbeth, playing the role of Macduff, to then making his big break, originating the role of John Williamson, the slimy sleazeball of an office secretary, and DavidMamet's Pulitzer Prize winning Glengarry Glen Ross, all on Broadway. J.T. Walsh, ladies and gentlemen, was and always is a household name for my family, for he was one of the most amazing screen presences you would ever see for his subtle, mesmerizing realism. Like the term that has been coined since the beginning of cinema practically, a character actor. He's been in everything, worked with everybody, and every time he was on screen, oh baby, was he on. Of course, he was always known for his film work, but we must never forget his foray in television with his excellent appearances on The Ellen Burstyn Show, The Equalizer, Lois and Clark, Windmills of the Gods, the miniseries, his fantastic performance as Warden Leo Brodeur in The X-Files, and his one big TV series outing of the sci-fi drama Dark Skies, which was actually not a bad show. It was maniacally hard, my friends, just comprising this top 10, because no matter what J.T. Walsh did, he was amazing in everything. Absolutely everything. But of course, rules are rules, and we must follow them. Or like Sergeant Dickerson, if you toy with him, he'll burn you so bad you wish you died as a child. God, that line is so vicious. But JT sells it beautifully, as he always did, from playing slime balls to authority figures. He gave each and every character truth that we absolutely could handle, Jack. Now, time to get the show on the road, people. Here are the top 10 best performances of one of the most underrated actors of all time, J.T. Walsh. Now, starting off at number 10, we have Miracle on 34th Street. Yes, the 1994 remake of one of the best Christmas classics, and this adaptation, scripted by John Hughes, is not that bad, honestly. Mainly because the ASL scene with the little girl Sammy is one of my favorite things ever. But you know what's my other favorite thing in this whole film? is, of course, JTWalsh's fantastic villainy performance as Ed Collins. The prosecuting attorney who really doesn't believe Sir Richard Attenborough is Kris Kringle, even though his own wife testifies differently. Yes, this film should not have been made because the original is just so magically iconic, but in the land of positivity, JTWalsh makes his role so seethingly effective that every time I do happen to catch this remake, I always want to see the scenes with JT in that courtroom and just delight the Christmas spirit out of us. Even for an intended family film, he still plays his antagonistic character with such rigor and realism, which I always appreciate. But by the very end, oh, this shouldn't be a spoiler, you all should have seen this, he embraces the spirit of Santa Claus. So he's certainly a swell guy, just doing his job. I like that. Number 9, Red Rock West. One of the most underrated Western neo-noirs ever made, folks. Written and directed by John Dahl, with JT giving such a vicious and silent terror of a performance as Wayne Brown, a local bar owner who mistakes a young drifter played by none other than Nicolas frickin' Cage for a hitman, Lyle from Dallas, and gives him the lowdown on how to get rid of his wife, Suzanne, played by Laura Flynn Boyle, only to be given another proposal from Suzanne to get rid of Wayne for more money. But will he escape in time until the real Lyle from Dallas shows up, which he does, and is played with such craziness and slickness by Dennis Hopper. Perfect casting. Dennis Hopper apparently was supposed to play JTWalsh's role, but Dennis Hopper wanted Lyle so badly, so gave amazing way for JTWalsh to command the screen. The first of 2 collaborations between director John Dahl and JTWalsh, whom, after the great and surprising success of this noir, would do The Last Seduction just 1 year later, which is another fantastic film. Walsh is just the perfect choice for this role, which, spoiler alert, holds more tricks under his sleeve than what is conceived, being the sheriff as well as the local bar owner. And he's willing to do whatever he can to take down his wife and the double-crossing Cage. Walsh and Hopper apparently had some heated moments, for the last scene in the graveyard was not a happy time for Walsh. For Hopper, being Hopper, would actually almost injure Walsh with that knife that he chucks at him. But all in all, Walsh is still the utmost professional as he portrays a desperation and sinister quality unlike any other. Number 8, Blue Chips. Oh yeah, one hell of a sports drama directed by the man, rest in peace, William Friedkin, which features JT as good old Happy, a booster who just simply buys the next upcoming basketball players, bribing them over certain games they play and teams they sign on with. Nick Nolte, the Nick Nolte here, who is totally not doing an impersonation of basketball coach Bobby Knight, finds no joy in this, but realizes he has to play hardball in order to really succeed. So the moral dilemma is really being crushed as we speak. Yes, while it's not the greatest basketball film ever made, nor is it necessarily one of the greatest films of all time, you cannot deny what makes this film work and cook and sizzle. And yes, the performances from everyone around, from Nolte, Ed O'Neill, Mary McDonnell, and of course, Walsh, who is just as slimy and greedy as you would want him to be in this role. Once again, he commands the screen with every scene he is in. That makes the tension and the storytelling all the more fascinating and intriguing. And who the hell doesn't love JT's big flip out scene when Nolte comes clean? Spoiler again, sorry, at the press conference. God, how he goes off is just epic, and he always deserved grand applause every time he belted out those big scenes. We owe it to him. Number 7. Good morning, Vietnam! Yeah, you know, every time I talk about this film, I have to introduce it like that. Come on! But having discussed this before on the video of Robin Williams, which you can find right here, this is such a fun yet powerful film, loosely based on the actions and influence of DJ Adrian Cronauer, played by Williams in a phenomenal Oscar-nominated performance. Now get this, JTWalsh this time plays the villain. Surprising. Yes, Sergeant Major Dickerson, who is in need of a blowjob more than any white man in history, according to Cronauer. That is humor. I recognize it. Jesus, I love how Walsh delivers every single line as Dickerson. He is just truly one crazy, wild-eyed son of a bus driver who opposes everything, every attitude, every piece of humor Cronauer is all about. As Cronauer livens up the radio station with rock and roll and make the best of what is going on in the middle of Saigon during Vietnam. But you know what Walsh does ever so effectively? He makes us truly understand the plight of his sergeant major, who takes his job crazy seriously, life or death, because he lays it out plainly that it is life or death. And he needs to treat it as such, for he has seen men die over this war. No matter how bastardly the characters may be, Walsh still gives it enough oomph to see the sincerity in their eyes, while at the same time still hissing at the sight of them, because we all love old-fashioned villains. Number 6, A Few Good Men. Yes, indeed, a true modern classic directed by Rob Reiner, based on the hit play written by the great Aaron Sorkin, featuring, of course, an all-star cast, including JT as Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Markison, U.S. Marine Corps, who is the right-hand man of Colonel Nathan Jessup, played brilliantly by Jack Nicholson in a more than well-deserved Oscar-nominated performance. Based on a real case of a code red in Guantanamo Bay, this story had to be adapted very efficiently, which it was by Sorkin and Reiner. And one key element is the character of Lieutenant Colonel Markinson, which JT gives the perfect amount of yearning and prideful authority, but also quiet desperation, for he knows the truth about what happened to Santiago, and his choice to become an informant for Lieutenant Caffey, played excellently by Tom Cruise, causes such a deep tension that you don't know where it will lead. I mean, if you haven't seen it before, of course, but if you have, oh man, it's just as exciting, even if you've seen it like 100 times. I love all of JT's moments with Jack, and with their little screen time together, you can already sense the history they have with each other as their characters. Spoiler alert, it's always sad to see JT's character go in every film he's practically in, and that says something about his presence every time. Director Rob Reiner said JT was just the perfect natural, and JT was given the choice of whatever character he wanted to play here, and JT chose Markinson, which is easy to understand why. Though his screen time is quite limited, the moral dilemma that Markinson faces is gigantic. And since he's played by Walsh, you know it's one of the most memorable characters and performances in the whole film. Reiner wanted the whole cast to be, quote, as good as JTWalsh. And to receive praise like that is priceless, and honestly so true. And I'll tell you the truth in saying, the movie isn't as good without him, but you can't handle the truth. Sorry, I couldn't help it. Number 5, Pleasantville. One of my sincere favorite films ever made, my friends. And of course, it only gets better because of JT Walsh, who of course plays the silent main antagonist of this lovely fairy tale of a powerfully beautiful film, playing Big Bob, the mayor of Pleasantville and head of the Chamber of Commerce, who senses immediately that something is happening to their cute little TV town. Things were pleasant, and they seemed to be turning, well, unpleasant, in his terms. People turning colors, reading more, dressing in expansive outfits, sexual discoveries, and more, thanks to a few outsider kids who mistakenly zap inside the fictional TV town, played by Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon. I hold this film in a very, very special place in my heart, folks, for this was the first time I remember watching and noticing JT Walsh. I was 8 years old, and being already blown away by the film itself, I see JT Walsh just quietly command the picture with gravitas. Every scene he has with fellow DavidMamet collaborator William H. Macy is just pure gold. The patent reference to Big Bob's pump-up speech to the town husbands is hysterical, but also so relevant to today. And he has the biggest payoff, spoiler alert, at the end during the town hearing, not a trial, and Toby is egging him on. What if one day all the wives went to work while the husbands stayed home and cooked? That is not going to happen. But it could happen. No, it could not. Boom. How he gives into his true colors. It's hysterical and perfect. Sadly, this was the first of 3 films that would be released posthumously after JT's sudden death in 1998, and is given a rightful tribute, for he deserved all the tribute and love in the world. Number 4, Hope, the made-for-television, tense heartwarmer, directed by Goldie Hawn in her directorial debut, but significantly, the only performance that earned JTWalsh an Emmy nomination for Best Supporting Actor, and unfortunately, posthumously, JT, as Uncle Ray, adds again the perfect amount of gravitas for the story to work. No matter how made for television the script is, the freedom of the cast and chemistry of them all is a beautiful sight, with the young Jenna Malone, Catherine O'Hara, Christine Lottie, and more. How JT is able to stand tall, even though he may be so suspect in killing a young black minister in a movie theater fire that he owns. JT really was the epitome of less is more, and aced the skill set of showing us, the audience, everything of what he was thinking in just one look. It's grade A acting that again has all of us lament and how he went away too soon. Number 3, Needful Things. Oh, I mean, come on, folks. This mediocre film adaptation of one of Stephen King's fascinating novels is only elevated because of its fantastically camp yet sincere acting by an all-star cast, including and especially JTWalsh's wild and hilariously volcanic performance as Buster. Danforth Keaton III, the selectman of the town of Castle Rock, who gets driven to even more madness after the influence of Leland Gaunt, the newly moved-in store owner of Needful Things, played masterfully by Max von Sydow. Once again, the film itself is nothing amazing and quite unfaithful to the book. However, I and many audiences are certainly not complaining about the expansion of Danforth's character in this adaptation, being that he is played by JTWalsh. JTWalsh is unbelievably unhinged here. In his own words, literally chewing the scenery up and down. Every scene he is in makes the film 10 times better. And like a Stephen King novel, the characters are certainly darkly comedic, like the vicious and yet hysterical way Danforth treats his poor wife Myrtle, like when he's handcuffed to his car and he says, "Just bring me that hammer." "Now, you moron!" And of course, spoiler alert, how it escalates into a bloodied hammer and then getting a call from Leland and then, "I killed my wife. Is that wrong?" All of his lines work absurdly and wonderfully. That he, among the great cast including Ed Harris, Bonnie Bedelia, and Amanda Plummer, JT finds sincere levels to Danforth that makes him very tragic and such a feral roller coaster to experience. For his scene-stealing performance, he was also nominated for a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor. And it's times like these where you want to see him play out-of-this-world characters just as long as you don't call him Buster. Number 2, Breakdown. Man, oh man. How I wish this could even be number 1, folks. Have I mentioned that this top 10 was incredibly difficult, especially these top 4, these top 5, all of them? Because JT's gripping and visceral performance as Red Bar is what villains are made of. You want to talk about one of the greatest villains of the 1990s, in my opinion. Because JT just naturally brings an edge to him that is three-dimensional. That after you think your eyes deceive you because he seems so one-dimensional, being that he only wanted one thing, money. But because he is portrayed by JTWalsh, you see everything else displayed in his eyes. If you haven't seen Breakdown, I can't recommend it enough. But who is better to play the main villain to good guy Kurt Russell, who just wants his wife back after their car breaks down, and Red Bar offers to give her a ride to the nearest diner while the car is being fixed. Biggest mistake ever, Kurt. Come on, man. And then becomes a Twilight Zone episode. Like, is Kurt losing his mind when he finds JT later on the road after not finding his wife at the diner, and then to have JT say, "I've never seen you before in my whole life." But when we get a great realization, no more funny games. Kurt is captured, and the great slow zoom on JT, about to come clean about what he really wants, but more importantly, what Kurt really wants. Something about 5'5", brown curly hair upstairs and down. God, so wicked. JT just had that voice that could crawl up and down your skin like a spider, that would just make you tingle with fear. And like a phenomenal actor, would look effortless every time. Kurt Russell and director Jonathan Mostow were in talks about who should play Barr, and both of them agreed immediately that JT was the perfect choice, because in Kurt's words, he was nothing phony, utterly flawless. When JT got the script, he returned it with a lot of his own dialogue scratched out, leaving Mostow confused. And JT said, "I'm a much better villain if I don't need anything from him, just the money. Anytime I need something emotional from him, it takes away my own power." And damn right he is, because it keeps him in the dark for the audience as well, but also gives JT more to play with as the villain that can be conveyed visually rather than in exposition. Fatefully, this would be the fourth and final film JT would do with Kurt Russell. And for his performance, JT was nominated again for a Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor. Whenever we think of true villains of the 90s, you should always remember JT's simplistic yet monumental performance that carries a road thriller like this to the top of the heap and makes villains so fun to watch. All right, you fun people, here are some honorable mentions for you. Backdraft, one of Ron Howard's better films indeed, with of course the all-star cast including Jennifer Jason Leigh, who actually recommended casting JTWalsh as the corrupt politician to Howard, because Leigh looked at Walsh as a mentor in acting. Beautiful props to Leigh for that, because who the hell else can you imagine playing this part? And at the time of 1991, once again, pairing with Kurt Russell. Though his role is quite small, he still makes every scene he is in memorable. And Walsh's reaction and how he gets it in the end is so good. That's your career dissipation light. It just went into high gear. So good. The Grifters, a hysterical yet fantastic film noir based on the novel, with JTWalsh adding a brilliant piece of conning to the big caper piece, ran with Annette Bening, who is just brilliant in her first Oscar-nominated performance. I love the moments JT has as a purely lively, enigmatic businessman, convincing Charles Napier of all of his investments. A brilliant small supporting addition from JTWalsh, which isn't talked about much. Outbreak, one of his other uncredited appearances as the White House Chief of Staff, who's all for the Operation Clean Sweep that Major General Donnie played well by Donald Sutherland. Oh, rest in peace to you, sir. His top 10 will surely be coming, don't you worry. But his operation was well approved by JT's Chief of Staff, who goes on the great speech and rant about how we're going to take this virus down by bombing Cedar Creek and thus wiping out the virus and killing all the other residents of the town so it doesn't grow to pandemic proportions. You can understand why this was the fourth most watched film during COVID. Anyway, JTWalsh dominates his one and only scene with the utmost strength and balls, as any gutsy, gung-ho politician would. And let me tell you something, he was that amazing in his monologue that you damn well believed him. Because when someone speaks with passion like JT does here, you get behind him. Hoffa, a film adaptation on the life and influence of the Teamsters Union leader, Jimmy Hoffa, played explosively by Jack Nicholson, directed by the great Danny DeVito. Why don't you direct more movies, Danny? JT gives his great supporting best, of course, as Frank Fitzsimmons, a real-life figure in the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, acting as president while Hoffa is in prison. It shows the construction of their friendship from their humble beginnings ever so efficiently in the storytelling, thanks to screenwriter DavidMamet, indeed, leading to what could be an ultimate assassination. The film may be inaccurate, but I'd be lying if I said I don't enjoy the hell out of this film for everything and everyone involved. There's just nothing like seeing JTWalsh, Danny DeVito, and Jack all together in a film, fueling each other vibrantly in each scene, that I hold JT's great and honorable performance as a dear treasure. The Negotiator. Ah, yes, the second film out of 3, released just 5 months after JT's death, and features one hell of a performance from Walsh that matches Samuel Jackson in all of their scenes together. Another film where everything just works excellently, and one of those great last action drama thrillers of the 90s. The body language and lying test is one of the film's highlights for sure, for it shows how JT could smooth out a deadly interrogation, but also snap in fear in a second. I must say, spoiler alert, the way JT is taken down accidentally and dies in Sam Jackson's arms is so sad, just considering he had got the call, as my dad would say, way too soon. Number 1, Sling Blade.
That's right, mister.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how many times I have seen this masterpiece of a film, written and directed by Billy Bob Thornton, whose screenplay earned him his Oscar, for it features one of the greatest supporting performances I have ever seen from an actor, JTWalsh, who literally only has 2 scenes, the very beginning and the very end of the film. He very well steals both scenes, which feature its own star, writer, and director, Billy Bob. JT's performance in this film was nothing like I've ever seen before when I first saw it at the humble age of 10 years old, and even to this day. If you have not seen Sling Blade, it behooves you to add it to your must-watch list immediately, as all of these past performances and films listed here. But this psychological, darkly comic drama starts out with a master shot of the patients of this mental hospital in Arkansas, and we see one character named Charles Bushman in the distance grab a chair, but he doesn't just grab it, he drags it all across this floor, slowly, menacingly. We know something is up with this guy, as he is just staring off at the other patients, the camera following him to Carl, played by Billy Bob, sitting right next to him, just blubbing his lips and staring at Carl. The score in the background is really murky and moody, giving it a perfect tone. And then he starts his monologue. Mercury is a real good car. All of this, including JT's monologue, is in one shot. And it is the perfect example of how dynamic and magical JT must have been on stage. If you ask me, this was JT's monumental moment to shine. Because here, he is not necessarily the villain. He is clearly a mental patient who, in his mind, just wants a friend. Even though he reveals in all of his monologues and passages, he is insane. But JT gives him a perfect amount of silence that is just terrifying. Billy Bob wrote his original monologue of Carl and made it into a short film called Some Folks Call It a Sling Blade, which also featured JTWalsh in the same role, and it was only natural to carry him forward into the Miramax-backed feature film of the heart-filled story. In an already all-star-packed masterclass of a passion project, JTWalsh starts and finishes this film with the perfect amount of depth, sincerity, energy, creativity, and quietly sinister captivity that every time I think of Sling Blade, the first thing my mind goes to is, yes, Billy Bob, but it really is the magnetism of JTWalsh. It is certainly one of the biggest tragedies for an actor like JT to never receive the grand opportunity of having a lead role, on top of the fact of always being known for playing villains. Another case of Hollywood always labeling actors as only certain characters, which needs to stop. JT, of course, hated always playing villains, quote-unquote bad guys, but he personally would still defend the fact that they are not bad guys. They are just misunderstood, which is exactly how a brilliant actor should think and treat every character, just as he did. It was one of the most horribly saddening days when JT passed away from a heart attack at the humble age of 54. He did take in alcohol quite a lot, but had gone through the program and got clean, and was indeed a chain smoker that his untimely death left such a hole in cinema. Friend Jack Nicholson dedicated his Oscar for As Good as It Gets to JT, and many artists were at the ready to give their appreciations and dedications for JT. How could they not, for the man embodied such humanism of people that I grew up around, not in the villainy way at all, just in their spirit. When you heard their voice, and JT always had such a soothing, booming, and powerful voice. I honestly can say his power is very much an influence into the power that was Philip Seymour Hoffman's, Paul Giamatti's, and many more. Film critic Andrew Johnston, who sadly passed away in 2008, sums it up beautifully as JTWalsh's performances offered a sort of running commentary on the power structure of American society, which when we watch that today, look how accurate and on the money he was. JTWalsh, more than just a bad guy on film, but a true storyteller that defined a decade, which should still be so remembered today.
Anyhow, I reckon that's all you need to know.
But tell me, folks, do you agree with my picks? What are your favorite performances of this underrated icon, JTWalsh? Please listen in the comments below, share with all your friends. I still need your help in growing the channel. That would be amazing. If you do like this, click like, subscribe, become a member on my channel for access to the movie reviews, etc., etc. But until next time, my friends, thank you so much for watching and stay pleasant out there.